We're going to learn some stuff today. Okay, objectives. Use a for loop to dynamically add and change elements. Use and explain setAttribute. That's going to be a super, super powerful tool in your tool belt. Change 3 or more styled properties through the DOM. That's one of the easier ones, but one of the more satisfying ones to be able to do. And to be able to change sources and class names and things like that. So we'll dive into it. First, we're going to do the for loop. So I'm going to make a for loop of objects, or an array of objects right now, not a for loop of objects. And then we'll just do name Spencer. And Sean. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit smaller so you can actually see all that's happening. It feels like a little excessive. Is that still okay? Is that too small? Wow, it's so much larger on my computer. Okay. There we go. Okay, now we are going to create a for loop, something you're incredibly familiar with. Painfully familiar with at this point. And we're going to go through this data. So first, we need to grab some stuff off the DOM to actually be able to append it and see what's going on. So I'm going to do a little bit, a very, very light amount of cold calling throughout this, just to see like how far you did get with Sean's, how much you understand, and kind of stuff like that, so that I can take it back if I need to. If you hate cold calling, just like put your head down and I won't cold call on you. Cool. So we're going to grab this div right here. And it's going to have the ID of my div. It's just a little bit easier way to grab it by IDs or class name. And important note, something that I actually forgot to do, and it messed with my code for a little bit. Your script has to be in the bottom of your body. If it's anywhere else, it's not going to work. Well, it'll work lightly. Like it's still linked into your index, but it's not going to actually be able to run your code because everything in your body has to load, and then your JavaScript kicks in and appends things to the DOM. But if it's at the top, then this div item hasn't loaded yet, and it can't append to it because it's not even there yet. So it has to be at the bottom. And script is how you tie in your JS file. Okay, so we're going to do a for loop. First, we're going to do let main equals document dot. Does anyone know what this is? How am I going to grab this div off the page? Query selector, yeah. So you can do, there's a million options. Query selector is usually the best way to do it. You can also do, like this would work the exact same way as document.get element by ID, or the reason we use query selector now is it's a way easier way to grab things off the page because you don't have to figure out, like, as you're typing, is it an ID? Is it a class name? Like, how am I getting this element? And a lot of them, when you use document.getElementBy, it's get elements, and then it gives you an array. Even if it's only one thing, it always gives you an array. So query selector is a little bit easier, and we'll get into more of query selector all. Have you guys touched that yet? Okay, we'll get into that a little bit later, but first we'll do this. So we've grabbed our object, the ID of, it's not main, I changed it, it's my div. And now we're going to try and create some elements and then take our data from our array and throw it onto those elements. Because this is how you're going to get most information from an API. It's going to be all object-based, so it's easier to just learn it this way. So let's create a list item. And then it's going to be document dot. There we go. No, wait, not query selector. We're going to create an element.
Oh. Dot create element?
Yeah. I used too obvious of language there. Sorry. Document.create element, and let's make a list item. Okay, so now we're going to try and append that list item to our div and then get some data onto that list item. So how am I going to append it? Append child. And then in here, I put li. And then down here, we're going to say, hey, li dot inner HTML. I prefer inner HTML. There's not a big difference to my knowledge of inner text and inner HTML. Once you get into React and things like that, it gets a little funky, but that's to worry about another day. How am I going to say, hey, I want the names in each of these. I want Spencer, Namita, and Sean to be list items. How do you think I'm going to do that? Just that? So since we're in a for loop, we have to do array at I. Like grab this item at this index, and then do dot name inside of that.
So that's all part of the loop, the main child?
Yeah, and so then the cool thing about our for loop is our data over here. It creates a list item for each one and then sets the name into each of those. So that is why DOM manipulation is so awesome. You can't hard code in each of those names, especially if you're getting from an API. You don't even know how many names there are going to be. So you need a for loop like this that says, hey, for each of these, create a list item, put it here, and put this data inside of it. Now we're going to go a little bit bigger. Let's go through multiple items in an object. Bigger. And then let's actually just copy this guy. We'll add to it. Let's do occupation, resident, instructor. Okay. So now we have our bigger object that we're going to loop through. So I'm just going to create another for loop and say, set up the for loop the same way I always do. Bigger. Ooh, that's how you spell it. Ooh, and quick note on this. So the reason I'm setting, it's always good practice to put whatever you're using in your for loop inside of your for loop. But the reason I have to do it this way is, say I take this create element li and I put it outside of it. And then here I try and say, hey, main.append child li and li.inner HTML equals bigger at the index I dot name. It's only going to do one. So it will do it, and this is actually a really helpful tip if you only want one of something. Like say you want an unordered list, you only want one. If you throw it outside of the brackets you're working in, it will only create one of them. Even if this was var, it would still do the exact same thing. It's still only going to create one, and it's going to create the last one since it resets the inner HTML each time. And so the last for loop, it goes through, it sets it as Sean, and it calls it done. So we want this guy to be inside. Yeah. So const isn't really going to change the scope. Let and var are the ones that change scope. Yeah. Let's do a paragraph tag instead. Mix it up a little bit. And let's say underneath this, we want there to be, or actually let's make this an H3. Let's make it a little bigger. I'm cocky about my name, so let's do that. And then make a paragraph tag underneath that. So we'll do let p equals document.createElement p. Then we'll say, hey, underneath that H3 tag, append child p. And then p.inner HTML equals bigger at the index of I dot occupation. And then if we save that, we see, oh, hey, I'm the res instructor, Namut is lead instructor, and Sean is an instructor. I don't know if he's a lead or not, so I just put instructor. So this is like really the powerful tool and why we drilled you so much on for loops and accumulators and all of that, because you're definitely going to use, we didn't use accumulators in this. You definitely will in all of the drills and checkpoints you're about to reach. I just graded some, and it's pretty consistent. You pretty consistently use them. Right now, though, let's look at our objectives. So I think we did that. We used a for loop to dynamically add or change our elements. Now let's use and explain setAttribute. So really quickly, I want you guys to take 30 seconds, a minute, to Google setAttribute and just learn a little bit about it. Okay, I hate the beeping, so I'm going to stop it, but your minute's up. So someone at this table, actually no, you've talked a lot. Someone at that back table, because you're the only one at that table, tell me what you know about setAttribute now. What does it do?
Sets the attribute of the specified element, or removes it.
What's the syntax of it? What are you going to put inside of the parentheses when you call it?
Whatever you're targeting.
What you're targeting? Oh, so like that, the attribute you want to change. So let's say we want to change the class, and we want to call it paragraph, just to be redundant. That's going to run now that I hit save, and light server is beautiful. So let's look now at the class in my p tag. Look, class of paragraph on all of those. And this is part of the awesome thing too. If you go into your style and you say like certain things aren't seen at all, display is none, or certain things are red, or things like that, in your JavaScript file, you can manipulate the DOM to say like, hey, if this thing is clicked, or if this thing doesn't meet these specifications, add this class to it, and then maybe it'll make it bold and red and say like, hey, you're wrong, or it'll make it disappear, or things like that. So that's when you want, mostly when you want to go into class or things like that. There are a million reasons why you would do that, but that's how simple it is. And now on all of my p tags, they all have the class of paragraph. What's that?
Cool. So then you wouldn't have to like write that go into your HTML file. You can just have them all set class, and then you can use that class in your CSS, right?
You can.
Without having to actually change like every p tag's class.
Yeah, like if for some reason you want all of your p tags to have the same class or something like that, you can do that. That you would use something. You would use document.query selector all, which we'll just get into this now since it came up, and you would say p tags. And what this is going to do, query selector all always returns an array. Even if there's only one item in it, it will still return an array of that item. So query selector is all what you want to do is what you want to do when you want to grab all the p tags off the page or something like that. You query selector all, and then you can for loop through it and do whatever you want with it. What's up?
Quick stupid question. Just the way you have your computer set up right now, do you have the browser on the right, or is that in VS Code?
That's my browser.
Okay.
I just have this.
Can you do that in VS Code?
No, you, I don't think you can. That's fair. No, I'm huge on, for some reason, I'm really obsessed with having blue as much as I can. I'm crazy anxious, so having blue on my computer calms me down a little bit. Having like red and yellow, and some people have that, just stresses me out so much. So yeah, I try and keep, you can edit this to be whatever color you want it to be. You can change the settings. Okay, what else? So you guys, you can set a million attributes to set attribute. This is how you do it. You say, hey, this is the thing that I want to set. This is what I want to set it to. So if you, I typically have only used it with class. That's when I normally use it, but also it's been a minute since I've really dove in deep into the DOM. You can use it for anything. It's more of a style and personal preference thing. I don't use set attribute as much. I used to say like, oh, there's one for, I think it's class name or something like that. You can just set the class immediately. But set attribute is very similar to query selector, where you can learn these million different commands, or you can learn the one and you can learn how that works, and you can do all the same things with it. So it's easier. So that's set attribute. We got that. So now we want to change 3 or more style properties through the DOM. I'm going to show you one. Sorry, I thought I muted that. I'm going to show you one, and then I want you guys to shout out other things you want to try or you think would work. So let's change h3.style is how you're going to do it. And after style, you can use any CSS command you normally give. And it's going to follow it. You just have camel case now instead of dashes or anything like that like you normally use. So I'm going to change the color of h3 to be blue, since we were talking about blue. And it's going to load, and look, all the names are now blue. And then we can, so what's something else you think we should change? The font? I'm going to do background color because I don't remember any of like the font commands. So let's change the background color of P. Huh? Yeah, so that's the reason I did that. And for style, it's going to be equal to, not parentheses. So usually if there's something that you're trying to use and it's not working, and it usually, or like you saw someone use it in a lesson and it's not working now, it's probably it either has to be in parentheses and it's not, or it should be equals to and it's not. Because when I first did this earlier today, I kept trying to use style.color parentheses blue and it wasn't working. I was getting some out of my computer. That was why. So let's change that to orange, because that will look so good. Style is my passion. Yeah, and so this is, you can change anything. We can go in and let's do something that's not color, like, and not font, because I hate font. Sorry, that was a good suggestion. It's just like my personal thing. I don't like to change font. So what's something else that you would style in a CSS that you bold it? Okay, style. Isn't it like, it's a weird, yeah, font weight.
If you wanted to style it like that, then like what if you had display flex? Like you could use flexbox.
Display flex. So that would work. That's something you don't want to style everything through your DOM. That would be a nightmare. You really only want to do certain things when you're changing them. So like if you're like, hey, I want all of this to be blue, but I also don't want all of them to be the class name. Like I don't want all of these to have the same class, but I want all of them to be blue. Then you can change it in here, and you don't have to give them all the same class in your HTML. You can keep those things different, but you can give them all the same color through your DOM. So things like that are really cool. Font weight, bold. Bolder. Let's go hard. It'll work. I can't tell the difference.
But I mean, technically,
I don't think it worked.
If you had like,
font weight doesn't always work.
if you had a paragraph and like you wanted some stupid, like you push a button and those 2 paragraphs switch spots, you can do that.
Those paragraphs to switch spots?
Yeah, like you can change the layout with this though, like just temporarily.
Yeah, you can. You can move things. What you would do is you would say like, hey, you would use event handlers, which is something you're going to learn this week, but not right now. And you would say, hey, when this is clicked, append this item to this instead of where it was appended before. Or prepend this item to this if you just want them to swap. There's a bunch of ways to do that. I don't know why bold isn't working. All the other ones work. So like if you said like width, and you wanted like 30 view width, that's not going to work because it's H3. Let's do P. You have the background color for that. So it would change that. I don't know why bold isn't working. Bold is something I normally don't touch because it's just such a pain. And a lot of fonts at least in my experience, won't recognize it or won't change with it. I tried to use them in those CSS warm-ups for the longest time. I was like, this font is perfect if it was just bolder, and it would never obey me. So that's something that I just kind of quit on. But if you want to push through that and figure out why it's quitting on you, more power to you. I'm just not as much into the design side of things, so I didn't spend too much time. Huh?
I'll say word.
Yeah, fair enough. Just get a different font. I don't know. Yeah, so we can change color, width, height, anything other than font weight because that's garbage. Trying to think of other things. Like, genuinely, anything you want to change to this, you can. You can say column, position, like position of...
I just want to move anything like center something or column.
Yeah, so let's change this to like 770. So it's a little bigger. And then we're actually gonna have to target not the paragraph itself because you can't center the paragraph inside of the paragraph. So we're gonna have to target the div that it's held in. So we're gonna say, hey, main.style.display equals flex. Which it already does that, but main.style. Floats are kind of a pain. Floats aren't typically something you want to use. You want to stay away from them just because they, like Flexbox, it behaves in a certain pattern. Grid behaves in a certain pattern. Floats can easily mess up whatever you're working in. Style.justify content. I've never actually done any of this with the DOM because you wouldn't need to, but we're going to try it. Center. And then we're actually also going to have to change. Yeah. So it changed it to it's changed the display to flex, so everything went in a row because that's Flex's go-to. And it looks awful, but it worked, and that's what matters. And it is centered. It doesn't look like it's centered because it did that, but it's centered.
So what are practical use cases then? So this is something you typically do.
This is not something you typically do. Changing background color, changing color are reasons you would mess with style in a DOM because all the times I've used it have been for error messages. If you're saying, hey, you did something wrong, highlight this in red. Or, hey, you click this button, this thing shouldn't show anymore, display is none now. Just take it away. So like if we did p.style.display equals none, it just takes it away. So that's a really cool one to use if you want messages to pop up, like when things, if you want to, it's a lot of like if you want to fake stuff to work too, you can use it. If you want to make it look like it works and it doesn't. So if you want like it to say like, hey, submitted, you submitted your form and nothing's going on behind the scenes, you can just have like when this clicks, have submitted display isn't none anymore. It actually displays now. But if you do that in any projects, I will notice. Just quick note. Okay, so DOM is awesome, basically, is, okay, so now we're gonna make an image and we're gonna change the source. Because that's one of the cool things you can do too. So also just quick note on this, try and keep everything in these loops or in these functions you're gonna call, like have all of your document.create element or query selectors, all of those things in the same sections of your code. So like all of your query selectors and elements and all of like your declarative things are up here. And then you're appending everything down here. And then you're setting style and things like that down here. It just makes it a lot easier to read and easier to come back to and edit because you know like, oh, this thing is wrong. I'll just comment out the section and see if that fixes anything. Create element image. How long are we? Oh, we have so much time. Okay, and then we're gonna say main.append child image. Then image.source equals something. Let's find something. I almost just Googled Charlie because he's right there. And I was like, that's not gonna do it. Oh, let's do this one. Let's do copy image address. Nope, I just did the wrong thing. There we go. Image addresses are great.
You click on it first.
That did not work. Okay, yeah. We're gonna.
You click on a picture first, and then do the copy image address from there. It should be a lot shorter, and it should work.
Oh, because it doesn't go.
Go back to where you were, where it just had the
I'm learning so much right now. Okay.
Yeah, if you hit right click and then hit in new tab. Yeah, open image in new tab.
Yeah, I did that. It's right here.
Yeah, and then go to that new tab. Copy it from there.
I think this one's just spectacularly long.
Well, if you copy the link from there, it should be shorter.
No, I think this specific address is just crazy long. Because I did this earlier today and it worked. Yeah. But anyways, there's puppies. Yeah, look how cute. Look at them. Look at them go. And that's because I have create image inside of here. Every time this for loop runs, it's going to create an image. It's going to append the image. Well, it's actually going to create the image when it's appended, because that's when it's called. And then it's going to set the source to this, and then it's going to show it under each instructor.
Now, if you
We are not that cute.
Outside the for loop, it wouldn't work at all.
It would still work because it's still inside a scope. So the for loop is going to be below. Like if we put let down here, it wouldn't work. But if we put it up here, it would. Because this for loop would still be in scope for those let statements because it's below where they are.
Would it make it run faster though if you did it that way?
If you had them outside of it,
Yeah, because isn't it making all those every single time it moves through now?
you want it to. And so this, it's not going to make something each time this runs. It's going to make something each time it's called and appended. So like, it doesn't exist until it says like, hey, this thing, create this and put it here. It doesn't actually create it until it's called right here. Yeah. So that's source. And then if we, again, like I said earlier, if we said, hey, image, actually, we want it to be out here. We only want one of them. Then Sean's the only one that gets a puppy. But obviously that's not how I want it, so we're going to put it this way. Okay, and class name we went over a little bit. That's not something we actually need to, I'm going to take that out. That's the same thing as setAttribute. That's the best way to change class name. Any other questions? That's pretty much the most that I had planned for us to go through, but if you guys have questions or things you're curious about working, hit me up with those now.
So why is it that when you place it outside the main for loop, it runs through Sean's?
Because Sean's was the last one to go through this for loop. So it creates these in order. So what happened is that it created an image each time and appended it to this each time, but it happens so quickly behind the scenes we don't see it. And then in the final one, it appends the only one, or it doesn't create it each time since this is outside of it. It only creates it the once, but it appends it each time and it sets the source each time. We just see it only on Sean because Sean's is the last one in the for loop. So it says, hey, append this image to the main underneath this p tag and this h3 tag, which is Sean's. Because he's the last one to go through the loop. Anything else? Yeah.
So are query selector and create element methods?
What an excellent question. Is query selector slow a method? Let's see. Yeah. Yes, it is. I didn't want to guess and give you the wrong answer is why I Googled it. I was like 80% sure, but I was like, that's not enough.
So those methods that are unique to DOM, can you get those anywhere else?
They're pretty unique to DOM. Well, it's one of those things that where else would you use it? You know? Like, you might be able to. That's one of those edge cases of I just don't know because I've never run into or heard of anyone running into where they would need to use it elsewhere. But query selector and query selector all are beautiful, beautiful gifts so that we don't have to do element by name, element by tag name, elements by class name, all of that stuff. Because having to like specify, so if we did, like let's say we did get element by ID instead right here. Wait, no, that's elements. Element. We want elements. Let's change this to a class, which broke everything. By class name of my div. Then it's going to break everything. It's going to say, hey, like, well, okay, let's comment this out first. Because yes, also none of this will work. It's going to break and get mad at you and it says, hey, like, we can't, it's not a function. We can't append something to main because main is an array. You can't append to an array. So we would have to say, hey, at the index of 0, the first one you get, append it to that. and then it would work. So it's just a pain because you have to add these little things. It's not actually that big of an inconvenience, but developers are picky. So it's one less thing you have to worry about. There you go. Oh, and I forgot that I broke the index. And this is Spencer's wisdom before. Don't worry about it, guys. I was initially gonna like give you tips through this lesson, and then I was like, that's way too much going on. Okay, any other questions? Anything else that's like you're a little lost on, even if it's like not how to interact with a DOM, but on the concept of what a DOM is, I can also help out with that because that took me a really long time to understand. Or you might be smarter than me. You might already get it. If so, props. I am gonna end the recording though because